What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the SEC East betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and with me, as always, is Collin Wilson. Ready to keep it rolling, my friend?
Yeah, we're going to talk about JT Daniels getting sponsored by Zaxby's and how Vanderbilt might not be the worst team in this division. We'll see.
Wow, that would be a shocker. We'll get to Vandy. It's an interesting, at the top, I think most would agree, Georgia, this is Georgia's division. You know, last year there was arguments to be made for Georgia or Florida. This year, Georgia's minus 450 to win the division, Florida plus 400. And then you have, Missouri 16-1, Kentucky 18-1, Tennessee 22-1. Maybe you'll make a case for Vanderbilt. I doubt it, but this looks like Georgia's division. There's a lot of changes with teams in this division, whether it's new coaches, quarterback competition, coordinator changes. We'll get into all of that. I guess we'll just start there really quick. Kentucky's win total over 7, minus 125. They just recently named Will Levis the starting quarterback, which then prompted Joey Gatewood to transfer. Levis, he was actually recruited by Liam Cohen, who Kentucky brought in as their new offensive coordinator. They want a more of a downfield attack. This Kentucky, the last couple of years, them for their defense and running the ball, very conservative. But you should see more play action, some more outside zone runs. They bring in Wandel Robinson, a Kentucky high school legend from Nebraska. A lot of talent to match with Josh Ali. So there's some talent on the outside, returning backfield. They do lose a lot of talent on the offensive line. I'll do some shuffling up there as well. But Levis has the strong arm. Accuracy, somewhat of a question. But Cohen actually recruited him when I believe he was at Maine. He made a couple calls to Levis. So I wasn't surprised that Levis actually won the starting job. Defense lost a lot at linebacker, got to replace Davis and Watson, but you expect the defense to be solid here. It's really going to come down to where does Cohen take this offense along with Levis, and can they actually have a more balanced attack to compete in the SEC? What are your thoughts on the Wildcats?
Yeah, I'm positive on the Wildcats. So, 2 years removed from Lynn Bowden Jr., one of the all-time greats quarterback, and he was complemented by a strong offensive line, and I think Stoops is going to try to, provide another strong offensive line. And when we started making these notes, I thought it was going to be a quarterback battle between Joey Gatewood and Will Levis. And now Gatewood is already in the transfer portal. So we'll see what kind of, depth there is behind him at the quarterback position. But, right tackle Darian Kennardi, he anchors a line that was top 35 in line yards and havoc allowed. They returned to 61% to the offense, but they ran the ball an awful lot. So the offensive line running back means a whole lot. They had one of the highest marks in the nation, as far as efficiency in running the ball. And, it's really the defense that we need to talk about here. Last year, they finished outside the top 100 in defensive havoc. They finished 96th in defensive success rate. And those two things have got to get back in line. Edge linebacker JJ Weaver and safety Yusuf Corker. They're both really supported that havoc number, and they both returned. So the havoc number should improve under Stoops. They have to get into opponents' backfield, something that they didn't do all last season. Yep. I think the 3-game set against Florida, LSU, and Georgia in October, that's really rough. The schedule is cake in September. The schedule is pretty easy in November. It's that October stretch that is going to be really tough for these guys, but at least September gives them a chance to figure out what they have and to improve before they get through the biggest parts of their schedule. And the coin flip games that they have against their opponents, they're just not going to be able to handle the Kentucky rush. And when I'm talking about Mississippi State and I'm talking about Missouri specifically, I think Kentucky's going to have a lot of success on offense against them. That makes the difference. I projected at 7.5 wins, so I'm going over 7 with these guys.
Yeah, we won't get too much into Kentucky because we'll talk a lot about their roster, specifically with Drew later in the show. And I agree with you. And look, I mentioned this a couple of times in various previews, but look at the last game of the year, because I think their win total, I said it right around 7 as well. In their last game, they're at Louisville, right? That there's a good chance that they need that game to get to 7 or 8 wins. So it could just come down to that game instead of tying up your money all season long. And I think that Missouri game is really going to set the tone for where this team goes the rest of the year. If they win that game, now it is at home. Additionally, you said the schedule's easy, but I am just petrified as someone who's a quasi Kentucky fan. My wife went to Kentucky, my whole family. I'm here in Lexington. Her bars do much better when Kentucky's winning. More so basketball, but football plays a part as well. But we spoke with Brody about LSU coming to Lexington for the first time since 2007. Well, that happens the week after Florida comes to Lexington, right? So they're going to host Florida and LSU in back-to-back weeks at home. What I'm worried about is if they start out 3-0, or even if they lose to Missouri and they go to South Carolina. Now, we'll talk about South Carolina. It was not projected to be any good, but that's a game, just knowing Kentucky football, it's trappy on the surface, but that's a game that I could see Kentucky going out there and laying a complete egg. But I think that right around 7 is probably the right number for Kentucky. We'll talk more about the Cats with Drew later on in the show. So let's go back to the top of the division and the heavy favorite, Georgia. Georgia, as I mentioned, is minus 450 to win the SEC East. Win total over 10.5, minus 130. True road games, they only have 3 true road games. Auburn, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee. Not bad. Their neutral games against Florida, who we'll get to, and then Clemson to kick off the year. So the schedule is pretty manageable. When you look at Georgia coming into the year, I had some questions about cornerback. 4 of their top cornerbacks in their depth chart either transfers or went to the NFL. Bringing in Kendrick from Clemson helped solve some of those issues and concerns that I did have. The defense is just going to be loaded as always. The question with Georgia, and it's the opposite of Ole Miss. Ole Miss, we know the offense is going to be great. How much will the defense improve? Well, Georgia now, I think, has a championship caliber offense. Will it be allowed to become unleashed is the question. JT Daniels is back. Under Kirby Smart, this is a team that just didn't throw for 300 yards. It happened only 4 times in 5 years under Smart before JT Daniels took over at quarterback, and he did it twice in 4 games. And so you did lose Pickens in the preseason, a wide receiver, but there's still a lot of talent and a lot of deep threat talent. This is a team that wants to push, they want to push the ball down the field. Their offensive coordinator does, at least. Offensive line, I think, should be solid. A lot of talent in the backfield. This is a legit national title contender. If they win that Clemson game, I don't see how they go under 10.5. I make their win total actually slightly over 10.5. I'm intrigued by Georgia from a futures perspective, which I'll get into in a bit, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Bulldogs.
Well, it's another season and another August. We're recording a podcast about Georgia where there is national championship expectations. The offensive line is loaded with NFL prospects. The running backs loaded with NFL prospects. JT Daniels has a ton of weapons to throw to, despite George Pickens being hurt. I think the Peach Bowl really speaks a lot to what JT Daniels. I know we went 4-0. I know we went 10-2 TD to turnover, TD to INT ratio. When he closed out the season last year. But the Cincinnati game is, I think, really kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen this season, because he was god-awful in the first couple quarters of that game. 3 interceptions, got Georgia behind, and then he managed in the fourth quarter to lead 3 drives that all resulted in points, a touchdown and 2 field goals. And Georgia ended up winning that game. And Cincinnati is no pushover. Their 2 corners are going to play at the NFL. Behind LSU, probably the 2 best corners duo in the nation. So JT Daniels represents what Georgia has been looking for 2 years, and that is a quarterback that they can trust to throw in standard downs. Passing downs obviously are things like 3rd and 12, 2nd and 9, but throwing on, say, 1st and 10 or throwing on 2nd and 7, that's just never been a part of Georgia's formula. They've been, run the ball up the gut, run it, and let our defense take care of the rest. And I think Kirby Smart recognized that this is just not the way to win a national championship. We're not going to be able to hang with Alabama. We're not going to be able to hang with Clemson if we have this kind of offense. So Todd Monken comes in as offensive coordinator. They started off the season with Dwan Mathis against Arkansas. Didn't do so well. Stetson Bennett saved the day. Stetson Bennett played for a couple games. We don't know if JT Daniels was just hurt the entire time or if they were holding him back or what was going on, a funky COVID season for everybody. But JT Daniels is the quarterback that they have desired. And now you're going to see the full breadth of the Todd Monken offense, which is great. The defense has filled in some key spots from the transfer portal. You mentioned Darian Kendrick coming in to play the secondary. Tyke Smith from West Virginia. That is a big pickup. Yeah, that's a big pickup. And the 3-4 defense is led by Adam Anderson. He had 6.5 sacks last year. So everything for this Georgia team. I mean, their havoc rating was 41st. I think that's going to go up. 26 in defensive finishing drives. That's going to go up. This is an NFL talented team, and they should absolutely win the East, and they should win the SEC. Their numbers right out for the SEC are plus 200 to plus 280. There's a wide variety. If you just shop around, I would say get the best of the number. I definitely love it at plus 250 or better, but I think the stop point for buying them is plus 220, considering what the money line will be against projected Alabama. We don't even know if it'll be Alabama, but if it is, the plus 220 is going to be a good number. The national championship stuff and the Clemson game, I know that we've cut previous pods and said, well, I like Georgia money line in the opener. But if you look at this last week of scrimmages, and that's why we wanted SEC to be the last conference that we went over, because we want to get as much information from practices and scrimmages as we can. And the news isn't really all that great coming out of Georgia. Tight end Eric Gilbert, easily the most prized possession to come out of the transfer portal from LSU. He didn't scrimmage this past weekend. He's got some personal issues and he's currently not with the team. He wasn't there with them last year, but that's a weapon that JT Daniels doesn't have. And then wide receiver Jermaine Burton and Kearis Jackson are injured with no timetable to come back. So these targets that JT Daniels is supposed to have that are the explosive ones that he can hit down the field, they're not practicing right now. They're either hurt or they're not with the team. And those pieces are desperately needed against a Clemson team where the only way to attack that defense is the secondary. Secondary is not bad. It's just that Clemson fields the best front seven in all of college football. So listen, I'll take Georgia to win the SEC. I'm wavering on the Clemson game. I need health out of JT Daniels targets for me to take the money line against Clemson.
Yeah, the defense, especially if one of these young corners also steps up. The defense, the front seven is loaded. The Smiths and the Walkers, there's multiple each. I mean, it's just a really good defense. The other thing to keep in mind, Todd Monken, his first year as coordinator was last year. COVID-shortened year. Additionally, he was preparing for some of that time with Jamie Newman was going to be the quarterback, remember? Yeah. And then you went to Mathis, and then you went to Stetson. And then all this, you didn't get JT Daniels till the very end. Now you have a full offseason to prepare. I do think that some of the news that I agree with you that came out of camp is concerning. My play here with Georgia, I grabbed some 8-1, which I believe is gone everywhere. But I played some plus 175, which came across in the Action Network app to make the college football playoff, because they can still, without those weapons, it's going to be tougher to beat Clemson. They can still beat Clemson. And if they do, I mean, they're in prime position to make the college football playoff. And given how big of a favorite they are, they might have Pickens back by the time the SEC championship rolls around. Given how big of a favorite they are to win this division, they're going to have a shot in the SEC championship game. I cannot see anyone else winning this division. So winning the SEC, probably getting to the college football playoff. So I think that plus 175 number to get to the college football playoff, I think that there's some value there. So that's the way that I would attack it. The team that is the second favorite to win the SEC East, Florida, they're about 4-1 to win the division. Their win total is under 9, minus 125. Crossover games, unfortunately, if you're a Florida fan, Alabama and LSU. You get Bama at home, you go to LSU, and LSU somehow beat Florida last year.
The shoe throw
game. Not sure if we'll see any shoes thrown this year, but Florida's an interesting case study because they lost so much on offense. You lose Trask, Pitts, just a generational talent, tight end / receiver, Grimes and Tony, just all of your weapons are gone. Emory Jones now comes in and takes over at quarterback. How much of a drop-off will we see on offense? You should expect a drop-off. Dan Mullen, known as a quarterback whisperer, can he get this offense rolling right away? Can the defense make any strides for Florida? The defense was very weak last year. I like some of the transfers they brought in on the defensive line. But the defense is going to have to step up. The running game, they're going to have to find and rely on a running game a little bit more. And how much of a drop-off will we see in the passing attack after they lost all of that talent. Florida obviously also has to play Georgia in Jacksonville on a neutral. Under 9, -125. What do you see with the Gators?
Yeah, you mentioned the run rate, 44% run rate, one of the lowest in the nation. They were so dependent on the pass with Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask, Kadarius Toney. None of those weapons are there now. And Emory Jones comes in after being patient and being behind. And, there's just not a lot of weapons there that he's going to be familiar with. And I mean, I've seen some people float out that Emory Jones for Heisman is a great value pick. And I'm thinking to myself, you have to make the college football playoff. Unless you're Lamar Jackson, you have to make the college football playoff to have a shot here. You have to be playing for your conference championship to have a shot. Florida doesn't have those advantages this year. Below 50% in TARP on offense. This is the year of the super senior. And I think Florida's, they're switching in some names on the offensive line. They've got brand new targets. Emory Jones does not have a lot of familiar faces around here. And as much talent as he's got, this is going to be, I think, tough sledding from him. Especially, considering just everything that's new. The defense is where the questions must be answered. And I mean, my problem with Florida is what we call third and Grantham, is that they can't get a third down stop for their life. I mean, they've ranked one of the worst teams. It's getting degeneratively worse. Like, they're spiraling downward every single year and getting third down stops. And that goes back to Todd Grantham. They had some ranks, I believe 101st in tackling, and 88th in coverage. I mean, these are fundamentals and techniques. And Grantham, who's been with Mullen since Mississippi State, Grantham's been around to coach some really good defenses. And for some reason, things as easy as tackling and coverage and rushing success rate. Like, the rushing success rate was 108th last year. And that's just not a fluke because of COVID. They literally cannot defend against teams that run the ball. So, if 4-1 to win the division, you'd have to give me more money than that for them to go up against Georgia, a team that can absolutely run the ball. That the portal does bring in Daquan Newkirk from Auburn. Antonio Shelton comes in from Penn State. Those are great pickups, but, we got to see him perform. They should improve from 108th against the rushing success rate. But third downs are really just a huge problem for the Gators. Win total projections at 8.5. The number's at 9. It's a no play for me. I mean, you mentioned Alabama and LSU. I mean, Georgia doesn't draw that from the West. So there's no division futures here. There's no conference futures. There's no Heisman futures here for me. And I think the win total is a little tad too high, but I'm not rushing to play the under. I don't know how they get to 10 wins. I can tell you that. But, on a season where I think it more than likely lands on 9, it's going to be a no play for me.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope. The hope is on that defense, which is going to have to be better. The offense can't be as good as it was last year. Is that, Newkirk and Shelton, along with Carter, their run defense shores up, and it's going to be an aggressive defense under Grantham. The hope is that the secondary gets better. And I was surprised that, they're probably good friends at Grantham State after what happened last year, but there was some shakeup with the coaches in the defensive backfield. There's some talent there. It's Florida. You can build around Elam. And can the secondary, just these coaching changes, scheme changes, can the secondary cover better, right? And then can the run defense with some of these transfers they brought in just get a little more physical and get more of a push and eat up bodies up front, because they're going to blitz and they're going to bring a lot of pressure in a lot of different ways. They need to cover on the back end. So the hope is, if you're a Florida fan, that they shake up some of the coaching assistants, the shake up that Dan Mullen had on the defensive side, that you believe that translates to better success on the defensive side of the ball. And then you can find a consistent running game. Emory Jones can help in that aspect a little bit. But I would agree. I think this win total is a bit too high. I don't really see a path for them winning this division, especially given their schedule.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that Mullen and Grantham are close, and they are. I mean, obviously Mullen brought him with him, and he's held on to him through, some of these struggles here with the defense. But I feel like Dan Mullen, in WWE terms, has turned heel. We are pumping up the crowd like it's a WWE event. We're wearing Darth Vader masks at post-game press conferences. We're bitching and moaning about the size of the crowd at Texas A&M and the fact that, there was way more than 50,000 people in the stadium. And him and Grantham got into it, a little sideline, run-in between each other during one of the games last year. And so I'm not, going to sit here and speculate on what the relationship is between Grantham and Mullen, but there was a side of Mullen I have not seen before last year. So I'll be interested to see if Florida has any problems on the field, if that translates into more goofiness or whatever's going on with Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I mean, there was the brawl, shoe being thrown. Yeah, we'll see if he can clean it up because yeah, Mullen definitely ruffled some feathers last year. All right, let's move on to Missouri, a team that Florida will play on the road. Missouri win total over 7 minus 115. This is year 2 of Eli Drinkwitz. They did a pretty good job last year considering tough circumstances for a first year at any place, but it was his first year as a head coach after moving on from Appalachian State to Missouri. Connor Basilac will come back at quarterback for his year 2 as well. Saw a lot of good things from him. One of the things that I was really looking forward to for Missouri was just a steadier wide receiver group. Last year, a lot of injuries, COVID, just in and out. They were and the offensive line too, but they were just starting a number of different combinations. Never really built much of a rapport between Basilac and his receivers. But now there's even more injuries to the wide receiver group in camp. So we'll see if they could actually stay healthy on the offensive side and how much of a jump Connor Basilac will take. The defensive side, there will be some changes. Steve Wilkes comes in, and they lose 2 good safeties, and they lose Bolton, one of their best linebackers, to the NFL. Road games at Kentucky, at Boston College, at Vanderbilt, at Georgia, and at Arkansas. Win total sitting at 7. How much of a jump do you think Missouri can take in year 2 of the Drinkwitz-Basilac combination?
I'm not confident, and really that all falls on the defensive side of the ball. They get 69%. That's below average here in the super senior season. What they get back on defense, according to TARP, they were 89th in defensive success rate. They were 126th in defensive finishing drives, and that is second to last in the nation. I believe teams averaged 4.9 points every time they crossed the 40-yard line. That's an amazing stat. You cross 40-yard line, you're given 4.9 points. I'm not sure if Missouri can just rebound from a number like that. They fired half the coaching staff. So there's new faces there. Drinkwitz, he indicated in the first scrimmage that he just had, there was no pressure and too many big plays by the offense. And that was Drinkwitz's words just this past scrimmage here a few days ago. So pass defense is led by safety Martez Manuel and linebacker Devin Nicholson. They both finished, They finished top 50 in opponent passing success rate. So really, it's on the ground that's the problem. But this, just complete ineptitude when opponents cross the 40-yard line, just allowing anybody to score. That just doesn't fix itself overnight, even though you've replaced half the staff. So Connor Basilac was, really impressive. He had 14 big-time throws, just 12 turnover-worthy plays. So he is on the right side of that ratio. He ranked 21st among FBS quarterbacks in adjusted completion percentage with at least 200 attempts. So for his, first season to come out there and sling it around, he was a top 25 quarterback when it comes to adjusted completion percentage, and he had more big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. And that is something that you can play on with this Missouri offense. They finished 45th in offensive success rate, 47th in havoc allowed. So those numbers can improve. I projected the number at 6.3. That's well below the 7. They're going to be short underdogs against Kentucky, Boston College, possibly when they go down to play Arkansas. All those games are going to be on the road. And that's where the problem is with their win total, is that these games that are coin flips and they're going to be short dogs are all going to happen on the road. The other games, Vanderbilt, they could beat them. Texas A&M, Georgia's on the schedule. Not easy whatsoever. The only 3 guaranteed wins on this schedule are South Carolina, North Texas, and SEMO. So, when you can only get 3 and your win total's at 7, there's some coin flips and the winnable games are on the road. I'm going to take the under here. Project 6.3. I'm under 7.
Yeah, it's a pass for me. I'm curious to see what Wilkes does with this defense. You might remember him. He was the Cardinals head coach at one point. He's spent a lot of time in the NFL. They're going to go to like a 1-gap, 4-man frontal, probably run a lot of base nickel, and you'll see a lot more zone on the back end. And they do have to replace 2 safeties. You might see Sean Robinson, ex-quarterback, but I believe transferred from TCU, starting at one of the safety spots this year. They have some talent on the defensive line with Jeff Code, and they bring in Blaze Aldridge from Rice at linebacker. They get one of their best corners back from injury. So there's some talent to work with on this defense. I want to see what Wilkes can do from a scheme perspective, running a little bit more zone, switching up the coverages, but there's a decent amount of moving pieces. The offensive line is also fairly experienced. Some of these wide receiver injuries, again, I was excited about Cooper, the Ohio State transfer. He's now banged up. Yep. But you're right. I mean, on one side of it, there's a lot of their winnable games are on the road. On the the other side of the coin, it's a fairly manageable schedule if everything goes right. Outside of at Georgia, what game can they not win? If you want to look at it glass half empty, you say they could lose these 7 or 8 games. But if the skill position players, and I don't think there's going to be much of a drop off after losing Roundtree at running back, but if the skill position players can stay healthy and there's impressive strides on the defensive end due to scheme changes, due to Wilkes coming in, this is a team that could, I think their ceiling is 9 or 10 wins if everything goes right. But I think 7 is about where it should be. There's going to be a number of games here, as you mentioned, that are coin flips that will get a chance to play Missouri either on or against based on how things are going early in the year. So I think you throw Missouri in that wait and see bucket and go from there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is a team that can score a lot of points, but I mean, your winnable games, you have to win some of these games on the road, and hosting Texas A&M at home, that's going to be a challenge.
Yep. All right, now let's move on to the bottom of the SEC, where we have 3 teams that we didn't get to yet that are all going through head coaching changes. Let's start Tennessee. Vol Nation, I know, is curious to hear your thoughts here. Are we going to be on or against Tennessee? Under 6 minus 120. It's the Josh Heupel era. Begins down there in Knoxville. Take it away on what you see with Tennessee.
Yeah, well, Josh Heupel comes in, and what that means, Tennessee, is that you are going to be number 1 in the nation in seconds per play. It's going to be the fastest offense. Defense be damned, which is quite interesting for Tennessee. You only return 55% in the year of the super senior, well below what the national average is of about 75%. The defense finished success rate wise. Opponent success rate they were 113th, 91st in defensive havoc. Probably a good reason why Jeremy Pruitt is no longer there. You lost probably your best player, Henry Toto, to Alabama. Eric Gray was one of the most productive running backs. He transferred to Oklahoma. Quarterback JT Shrout and Jarrett Garantano, they both left Knoxville through the portal. If you were to go to the transfer portal page and look and see who's been in and out, it's like you have to scroll multiple times to.
Unbelievable.
I mean, this team it's hard. And so we have to look and see what's there, because they've lost a lot just from turnover in the roster, but the transfer portal is taking a lot. Now Josh Heupel comes in, and he's not the kind of guy that's going to change his offense because of the personnel he has. Todd Monken did that for Georgia. He had to change because he had Dwan Mathis and Stetson Bennett. Josh Heupel doesn't care. He doesn't care if the quarterback can throw, and he doesn't care if the wide receiver is going to run. We're going to run this offense. And so, when you look at what the quarterback battle is going on right now, they knocked Brandon Maurer down to the 4th string quarterback, and he set up hitting the portal. So that just happened within the last week. So the position battle really is between Michigan quarterback transfer Joe Milton, Virginia Tech transfer Hendon Hooker, and sophomore Harrison Bailey, who stuck around. Milton took home the biggest numbers from their first scrimmage. I believe he had 2 touchdowns, didn't get much from the other 2 guys. So it looks like Milton is the one that could be getting the job. No matter who gets it, they're going to be running for their lives. This offensive line has not improved whatsoever. And Tennessee finished 111th on offense in sack rate, which means they cannot protect the quarterback whatsoever. So whatever Joe Milton had problems had running out of the pocket for Jim Harbaugh and missing targets completely, that might be back in play. So, definitely a negative there in their part. None of these quarterbacks are ready for Heupel's system, fastest in seconds per play. I think they're all got to get conditioned to see what Heupel wants to run. But, if there's any positive news here, can't get any worse on defense. The new defensive coordinator, Tim Banks, he wouldn't even commit to a scheme. I'm trying to find something positive about Tennessee, but Tim Banks was quoted as saying, my formation is going to be around the talent that we have on hand. He doesn't even know what talent he had. He had so many players ship out, lost their best player. He doesn't know the strengths and the weaknesses of the players that he has, that even right now as Tennessee is practicing, they're going to be multiple in formations because He's not exactly sure what's the best defense. So as to where Heupel's not going to bend on the offensive side from what he wants to run, Tim Banks as a defensive coordinator is going to bend and run the defense that best suited for the talent that they have. To me, that just screams they're going to have scores get run up all over the place. So while I don't have a future on Tennessee on the win total, the numbers in these games should be sky high. Their first total on the season is 57, I believe, against Bowling Green. Listen, I'm no fan of Bowling Green and McDonald throwing touchdowns there, but Tennessee's not going to be playing any defense, and they're going to try to score as much as possible. So for me, individual game overs, considering how bad their defense is and considering how fast they want to go on offense, I think individual game overs is the way to play.
Yeah, you mentioned Bowling Green. There are a number of free wins on this schedule.
Yeah.
Win total is 6. I mean, they have Bowling Green at home. They have Tennessee Tech at home. They have South Carolina at home. They have South Alabama at home, and then Vanderbilt at home. 5 free wins right there. Obviously, assuming nothing goes wrong, and there's a chance that they could lose one of those games. But that's 5 wins right there. Now, there are some really tough games as well. At Florida, they're probably not going to win. At Alabama, home against Georgia. But to get to 6, can they beat either Ole Miss or Pitt at home? Sure. So if they do that, then essentially they will get to 6 wins just with those, essentially by taking care of business at home. They're at Kentucky as well. I think the number is about right. The problem for me is this change, and you mentioned it. Last year they were slow, and now they're going to be super fast. And something that a lot of people aren't talking about is, and look, what happened is not all Heupel's fault. He just came in here. There was violations. They had their worst record in 97 years, then violations. AD, staff overhaul, then mass transfers. You lose a lot on the offensive line, defense, running back. You lose a lot of talent. But now you're going to come in and you're going to have this, simple, it's a quick read passing attack. It's not overly complex, but you just go extremely fast. And there's like 3 or 4 power runs that you base everything off of. And then you just fast pass, quick pass, go as fast as you possibly can. That's foreign to what Tennessee was last year. So that's a 180. One of the things I'm really worried about also is, first of all, if that doesn't work, then and it's not as efficient as Heupel hopes it is, then you're just punting it right away, and the defense is exhausted. So the defense is just going to be on the field so much more. There's not a lot of depth with everything they lost. Are there injuries, and the defense just deteriorates even more? Yeah, as you mentioned, they're not familiar with what scheme they're going to go to. I'd imagine you probably see a lot of 4-2-5, but this offense could work against the defense with how fast it wants to go. If there are any growing pains, depth and fatigue really become a concern for the Tennessee defense. So I was looking to potentially go under on them, but there's just 5 free wins on this schedule. And, there's some upside if the offense works. There's just a lot of holes on the roster now due to transfers. I will have a really good chance to get them to 6 wins, and it might not even be a super successful season. They just have 5 really easy games on the schedule. So Tennessee is a pass for me. All right, let's move on to another team with a coaching change, and that's South Carolina. Win total under 4, -130. It's Beamer ball. Shane Beamer takes over. You have a new quarterback, new staff. You're going to be moving to a new defensive scheme, 4-2-5-D. Luke Doty he started a couple games the end of last year. He was supposed to be the starting quarterback, but he was hurt now. And I don't think he's going to be ready for week 1. You have a St. Francis of PA transfer who's now quarterback 1 with, I think, a walk-on transfer. Is the second team quarterback now until Doty is back healthy. The first play of their scrimmage, he fell down, tripped over someone, and fumbled, which is not a great sign if you're a South Carolina fan. But brand new South Carolina, Beamer will try to revamp this program after it really has faltered under Will Muschamp, who's now gone. What are your thoughts on the Cox?
Well, I like how we're going South Carolina before Vanderbilt. I actually, if you want to make a side wager, I don't think Vanderbilt finishes in the basement. I think South Carolina does, but I mean, they obviously have to play each other. But listen, things are not going well at South Carolina whatsoever. Muschamp finishes 28-30. They let him go. Well, but there was some people saying it's a COVID season. You got to let him have a free pass, but they let him go with 3 games left. Mike Bobo comes in and he loses the final 3. South Carolina, they looked all over for a head coach. They had Hugh Freeze, they had Billy Napier on the list, but they settled on Shane Beamer. Not a bad hire, and he brings in some really good assistants with him. So the pedigree is there from a coaching standpoint, but this roster is just an absolute unbelievable dumpster fire. And you mentioned Luke Doty. Luke Doty got some playing time last year. The numbers were not great, not good whatsoever. There's a St. Francis transfer, but breaking news, an hour before you and I started this podcast, one of their graduate assistants has stopped is now a quarterback.
Yeah.
So
I saw it.
I mean, this is where we're at.
He was an ex-North Dakota State quarterback, I believe.
Right. So calling all people in Columbia, South Carolina, if you have some sort of quarterback experience, come on down to the trains, come on down and get yourself some barbecue, and maybe you can play quarterback for South Carolina. So, I think I'm really happy with the hire of Pete Limbo. Pete Limbo is a former Ball State head coach, and then he's gone on to be a special teams coordinator. And every stop that Pete Limbo has been at, he has improved the special teams everywhere he has been. He is just a great guy to have around rebuilding programs. So, speaking on, what Beamer has started to build there from a coaching staff perspective, that's good. But this is truly a year 0 for Beamer. The offense returns just 53%, well below the national average of 76%. Kevin Harris was going to return to the backfield after 185 carries. He's hurt. He had 37 missed tackles last year, and he averaged 3.3 yards after contact. Not great, but not bad, but he's hurt. And so, once that happened, I was pretty dead set on taking the under, even though I projected this at 3.6. Listen, Luke Doty's not there. Colin Hill, Ryan Aliski's not there. The freshman Luke Doty didn't generate any big time throws. The St. Francis kid's not going to do it. The GA is not going to do it. So I don't know what to say. The defense returns 41%. South Carolina is going to move to a new scheme, 4-2-5. I mean, just everything imaginable possible. The indicators that you don't want to take a team is happening here. New head coach, new schemes. We got a GA becoming the quarterback because Luke Doty is hurt. To me, this is under 4 all the way. Some 4s are disappearing out there. It's down to 3.5. I project 3.6. But now with Harris being hurt and the possibility of a GA playing quarterback, I'm out on this team. I'm a complete under here. I'm not sure they can win 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line is experienced, but it was terrible last year. I mean, they were 117th in tackle for loss percentage. They were also 117th in tackle for loss percentage on defense. The secondary was decimated, but it lost 5 defensive backs to either the NFL or transfer. It lost a lot of talent in the defensive backfield. There's a lot of winnable, or coin flip games in the schedule, but I agree with you. I mean, the wide receiver room, major question. Yeah.
I think East Carolina can beat them. I think Troy can beat them. I mean, I know you were trying to find the 4 wins here, right? Eastern Illinois, fine. They're going to be like 40-point favorites. Good luck covering that number. East Carolina, Troy, those are 2 teams to me on the rise, especially with the old James Madison coach at East Carolina and Holton Ahlers there. I mean, it's going to take a Holton Ahlers 5 turnover performance to get South Carolina that win, but Troy is on the rise and got Clemson at the end. I don't know. I don't see it. And I know they host Vanderbilt. We'll get to Vanderbilt in a second, but I can't find 4 wins on this schedule. I can barely find 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's new staff. Now major questions at quarterback. Zeb Nolan, by the way, he started at Iowa State, and then he was Trey Lance's backup. But he had he was a grad assistant coach, and then he had a year of eligibility left, and now he might be starting this year. As Jason Brown, he came in from St. Francis of PA as a transfer. Apparently, they're not satisfied there. But the wide receiver room, they have no one who had more than 11 catches coming back this year. So, I mean, who is the quarterback even throwing it to? I like the running back room, but the offensive line, there's questions. There's injuries now. The defense has to be completely rebuilt by new defensive coordinator Clayton White. So, I like the defensive line, but I mean, how far can that take you in the SEC? So, yeah, I think it's under or nothing here, and there's a lot of problems. But you hope that with Shane Beamer, you can rebuild this thing over a couple of years and start
Yeah.
to put some recruiting classes together. It's going to be a long process. South Carolina was in bad shape.
They got to
Transfers
give him
to
time. They've got to give
Yep.
him time.
Yep. All right. Well, let's close things out before we get to Drew Franklin to talk some Kentucky. Let's close things out in the SEC East with a team obviously Collin is itching to talk about in the Vanderbilt Commodores, who went winless last year. And I know you're a big Clark Lee fan.
Yeah.
So Vanderbilt under 3.5, minus 125. You have Ken Seals, who comes back at quarterback. He did show some flashes last year. Clark Lee has talked about this being, we talk about Shane Beamer and rebuilds. Clark Lee has talked about this being a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
So this is not going to be an easy rebuild at a school where it's not easy to build a competitive football team. They went 0-9 last year. The morale was just, I don't know. It looked like they quit a bunch. So you would think just with a new coach, the morale and the enthusiasm, the care, that'll improve, until they're 0-7. If they then who knows what happens. But they're going to, there's just a lot of changes here. There's going to be a first-year defensive coordinator. You're going to see more four-man fronts on defense. I won't go. And there's I like some of the receivers. So there's some talent on the outside to work with. The D's probably still going to be awful. How much can Clark Lee improve that is a major question. It just lacked a lot of speed last year. They were worse in FBS and success rate. Obviously, schedule has something to do with that. What are your thoughts on Vanderbilt, who's hoping their new offensive coordinator can also just give them something? This offensive line is so small, but can this team score? Can morale be better? Can they get to 4 wins? You're saying you're a little. It sounds like you're a little more optimistic than many out there on Vandy.
Yeah, I'm really optimistic because unlike South Carolina, this is a team that actually returns players. Like they are at the national average of 72% on offense and 77% on defense. And you say, well, these players were really bad last year. Why would you want a defense that was 126 in defensive success rate? But Stuck mentioned that maybe there was some giving up going on, a team that was 0-9 with a coach that had been on the hot seat for a while. And I just, when you look at this, they do have a quarterback in Ken Seals. He was dropping dimes at the scrimmage the other day. He looked just fine. They have a backup quarterback behind him who's doing great. The Commodores are now being coached by Clark Lee, and I am a big Clark Lee believer. I think he's the reason that Notre Dame made 2 college football playoffs. So they're going to run the 4-2-5 scheme that Lee has ran at Notre Dame, that Mike Elko runs at Texas A&M. And from a defensive side of the ball, they went and got Jesse Minter as the defensive coordinator. He's worked exclusively with the Baltimore Ravens secondary and served as the coordinator role at Georgia State less than a decade ago. So that was another positive hire for me. And middle linebacker Anthony Orji returns as a leading tackler for a unit that was 64th in pass breakups. I mean, I know that's mid-pack, but for Vanderbilt, that's not too bad. So the defense isn't undergoing like a huge scheme change. They're bringing in a guy from, the Baltimore Ravens that knows how to coach a secondary. You need a secondary against this schedule. And I believe in what Clark Lee does from an organization standpoint, from what I've heard from his time at Notre Dame. This is a guy that was ready to be a head coach a long time ago. So I think the defense is going to stabilize in stopping explosive plays because of the coaching that they're going to get in the secondary. And the interesting thing is that David Ray is the new offensive coordinator. He comes in after being the wide
plays. I don't think.
No, I don't think he's ever called plays. He was a wide receiver coach for the Arizona Cardinals, I should say. He had a coaching stint at this Texas Tech quarterback coach. So obviously he's a Cliff Kingsbury guy. And Ken Seals can throw the ball as a quarterback. And if you're going to put him in some sort of Texas Tech, Kingsbury, Arizona Cardinals type offense, then, that might surprise a lot of teams in the SEC. And, he indicated that, starter for quarterback may be delayed until game day, but Seals really looked good in the scrimmage. Vanderbilt's spring game, I was looking at the play calling for that. It was a balance of rush and pass. Both Ken Seals and Mike Wright were getting the bulk of the duties at quarterback. Mike Wright's going to be able to run the ball more, whereas Ken Seals is going to be able to throw. So we'll see what combination they play through each game. But David Ray has been very much, told everybody the focus of the Vanderbilt offense is going to be on technique and footwork, that they already had the skill set in house. It's just that they didn't perform last year because everybody forgot technique and footwork and fundamentals. And I think just by improving that alone with a coach that's as detail oriented as Clark Lee is going to do great things for this team. There were a lot of explosive pass plays in the spring game by Ken Seals. So, I mean, that's definitely something to look forward to. So definitely signs of encouragement here. If they can stop the explosiveness through the air, they rank 34th in opponent expected points, which means they stopped explosive plays. I expect that to continue, especially with Clark Lee in. My projected total on them is 3.9. The market is juiced on the under at 3.5. They're just going to be improved after an 0-9 season. I can count the wins on here. They're going to beat East Tennessee State. The Stanford game, I think, is the swing game. As low as I am on Stanford, as low as you are on Stanford, they get that game at home. And considering Stanford's like sandwiching that between Pac-12 games, I don't think they care that much about going. This offense is going to go a little bit faster. Ken Seals can throw the ball. They're going to spread it out. They're going to, and I like bringing in a defensive coordinator that was just with Baltimore Ravens for so long. So I'm high on the coaching staff. I don't think the talent is as bad as the numbers reflect because Derek Mason gave up and it was an 0-9 team. I'm not going to sit here and say Vanderbilt's going to make a bowl, but I'm going to take over 3.5 at plus money, and they're going to finish ahead of South Carolina in the SEC standings.
Well, basically, you're counting on them. I mean, they also get UConn at home, which will be a win. So if you're saying, UConn and East Tennessee State games at home, they host Mississippi State. They host Missouri. They host Kentucky.
At South Carolina.
So, at South Carolina. So, if the coaching staff improves. Now, look, the offensive line, they have 10 offensive linemen now with FBS starting experience. They get some guys who opted out are back this year. Some transfers come in. I like Cam Johnson. I like some of the guys that Seals can throw to. If that offensive line can get better because it was just so small last year, this offense can do some things. I'm curious to see what Lee can do with the defense. That'll keep me off this win total. I mean, the defense was just so bad. How much of it, and they lost their two best defensive linemen, probably arguably their two best players. How much of it was due to, just the quit factor, the COVID year, and how much of it was due to scheme and personnel? I don't know. I can see your argument that you're making, and then you bring in Lee here. You get some players back. What can that scheme and effort and care do for a little bit of bump on the defensive side of the ball? If you see some improvement there, the offensive line gets better. I could see Vanderbilt definitely being more competitive than they were last year. And then there's some winnable games on the schedule.
But you would agree you'd agree they're in a better spot than South Carolina, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're as talented, but now with the quarterback question, they don't have as much talent, but not with the quarterback questions with South Carolina. Obviously that's such an important position. Vanderbilt's in a much better space right now with their quarterback than South Carolina is. So South Carolina is definitely still the favorite in that game, and I think they have more talent overall. But the news we're getting about South Carolina right now is not promising. All right, it'll be an interesting team to monitor. We'll see if Vanderbilt can show a lot of improvement under Clark Lee. Maybe Colin will fall in love with Vanderbilt overs. I hope not.
I mean, it's plus. Oh my God! Listen, if they're going to run tempo, the offensive coordinator is coming from Kingsbury, right? He's coming from the Arizona Cardinals. He's coming from Texas Tech. What kind of offense do you think they're going to run? They're going to let Ken Seals just drop dimes all day? I just think this is a team we need to keep our eyes on. I can't believe that, out of all the screens I have here in the office and my huge setup, I'm going to have to find room for East Tennessee State Vanderbilt, because if I start seeing Ken Seals dropping dimes and only letting 15 seconds off the play clock, then listen, we got something to bet on here with Vanderbilt. So my eyes are wide open with these guys, and I think they're just in a much better spot than South Carolina.
Hey, maybe the special teams, which was just an utter disaster. They bring in special teams coordinator from Syracuse, who's very strong. So maybe the special teams gets a bump as well.
Yeah.
All right, before we get out of here, SEC East 3 and out. First down, favorite SEC East win total. For my favorite win total, I don't love any win totals in the SEC East, but the one that I like the most is Florida under 9. I know it's juiced a bit, but I still think the number is too high. You lose all of that offensive talent, Trask, Pitts, Grimes, Tony. I mean, that's going to be hard to replace. Emory Jones does have some experience. Mullen is the quarterback whisperer, but I still think this Florida offense takes a major step back. The defense, I know they had some shakeup on the staff. Can you expect the secondary to be a lot better? I like some of the transfers they brought on the defensive line, but it's not a defense that's going to take an astronomical step forward. There are some flaws on this team. I don't see them beating Georgia on a neutral field. And then, you have Bama at home, at LSU as your two crossover games. And then you have tricky road games at Kentucky and at Missouri. Wouldn't shock me if this team finished 7-5 if things don't work out on the offensive side. But essentially, this comes down to a numbers play. I think the number is a bit too high. So I'm going under 9 with Florida.
Yeah, I like it. I can't see any way that Florida's getting to 10 wins. And I think at worst, you're pushing there. There's so much to replace. Win totals I mentioned on this podcast, Kentucky over 7. I mean, that was just, barely mathematically there. Missouri under 7 mathematically was like 6.3. And I mentioned South Carolina under 4. And I feel like I picked on them enough in our segment, and really 3.5s are what's out there. And that number is going to continue to go down to 3 with the GA taking snaps. So I don't think it's really a best bet for the pod. So let's go Vanderbilt at plus money over 3.5. If you want to take a juiced over 3, and you want to take a juiced you want to take a juiced 3 and go over on that, I can accept that too. But it's a win total that I make at 3.9. This is a team that isn't starting from scratch. This isn't really a year zero situation for Clark Lee, much like it is for Shane Beamer over at South Carolina. This is a team that has 2 quarterbacks that can produce. They maybe going to an offensive scheme that is more like the Texas Tech Cliff Kingsbury. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver coach is their new offensive coordinator, and although he's never called a play, that means defenses don't know what he's going to do either. First scrimmage is some pretty good stuff for quarterback Ken Seals. Defensively, I expect them to improve. It's not really a scheme change going from a 4-2-5 with Derek Mason over to Clark Lee. I expect there to be massive improvement there. The team might have been giving up last season, not really a reflection of the talent that they have in-house. The schedule to me is way more manageable than a South Carolina schedule that includes Clemson and a Troy, like teams that are up and coming. Those are tough wins. But when you look at Vanderbilt's schedule, East Tennessee State, that's a win. Stanford, you're getting them to come to you across country. Don't know if that game's going to be at 11 o'clock in the morning in the Jefferson Pilot time spot, but it's good to get them in between a Pac-12 sandwich game. There's other games on the schedule that are winnable, and they go to South Carolina, a team that they can, UConn, and they can beat South Carolina on the road. So I'm going to go 3.5, over 3.5 with plus money on it. I projected 3.9 in Clark Lee. We have always trusted at Notre Dame. We continue to trust him as he takes the reins over at Notre Dame. As he takes the reins over at Vanderbilt.
Big balls. That's a very courageous bet, backing Vandy after a winless season, but I don't hate it. And the enthusiasm is certainly there. And I know you are a Clark Lee fan, so it's not surprising. All right, for second down, favorite SEC East future. I've mentioned this a couple times here. I'm going Georgia plus 175 to make the college football playoff. Did play some national title futures, but those numbers are now long gone. I just think there's multiple avenues for this team to get to the college football playoff, starting with a season opening game against Clemson. Win that game, first of all, it's going to say a lot about where they are as a program and offense, but I think that they're going to be in the driver's seat to get to the college football playoff. And I think that they're so head and shoulders above everybody else in their division that they're going to be in the SEC championship game. You win the SEC, you're going to have a really good chance to get to the college football playoff. So give me Georgia plus 175. I think this offense is now a college football playoff championship worthy complement to what's normally and usually a championship worthy defense, with JT Daniels now there for a full season. Todd Monken gets a full off season prepared, knowing who his quarterback is. So I love the upside of this Georgia team in a division. They're clearly the best team, and I think that they find a way to get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the same team. I'm going to go a different angle. I'm going to go Georgia to win the SEC. There's numbers out there plus 200, so I'll stick with that. But I have seen it around plus 280. So anywhere in between, I'd make plus 200 my stop rate on the buy. If they face Alabama, they'd be projected around a 3.5 point underdog. So that makes that plus 200 even more valuable. And then consider what Florida's schedule is. I just don't think there's any competition whatsoever in the East. Georgia's going to roll through that and the schedule, get to the SEC championship game. And by then, George Pickens, like Stuck said, could be healthy. And we have an entire receiving core. Right now, I'm a little bit nervous with the injuries they have, to wide receiver, or the fact that tight end Eric Gilbert is dealing with some personal issues and he's not there. Those targets are desperately needed against Clemson in the opener, and we just don't know where that's going to be right now. So I'm going to stick with Georgia to win the SEC. The blast buy price on that should be plus 200. That's going to be better than the money line that you would get on them against a potential game against Alabama in the SEC championship game.
Love it. All right, now before we get out of here, third down. We already did the SEC West betting preview. This is the SEC East betting preview. So let's do a SEC championship game prediction. I will start. I'm going to say Texas A&M beats Alabama at home, and they win the SEC West, and Georgia clearly comes out of the SEC East. So we see Texas A&M, Georgia. Georgia comes out on top and makes it to the college football playoff. And I win Alabama under 11.5. Obviously, all of my predictions will be based around my bets. Georgia over Texas A&M. Where are you going?
Well, I'm going to go Georgia to win the SEC, of course. It's just the team who they're going to beat. Now, I did in the SEC West podcast take Ole Miss at 15-1, but that was a play on the value of the number that should be 9-1. I really want to join you with the Texas A&M bet, but I think what I'm going to do is leave it open-ended, and I'm just going to go with another bet, another deliverable for everybody, and that is I am currently shopping for an Alabama to not make the college football playoff. There are a few shops out in Vegas and one in Jersey that I know of that offer no odds on the college football playoff. If I can find a decent size, I would guess that I would probably need I would love to get plus money on it, but I'm guessing somewhere around minus 110 to not make the college football playoff would be the play. Something you can easily play out of in the SEC championship game. I do think they take a loss. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, one of them's going to get them. Alabama to not make the college football playoff. Georgia to win the SEC. Obviously, that's either going to be over Alabama, Texas A&M.
Pick a team. Pick a team.
Pick a team.
No money. Pick a team.
All right, we're going to go with two of Nick Saban's kids. Let's take Kirby Smart to beat Lane Kiffin in the SEC championship game.
Wow.
Saban will be a proud dad at home.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, that'll wrap up the SEC East. And if you didn't check out the SEC West, make sure you do. Make sure you subscribe to Big Bets on Campus, wherever you listen to your podcast. Rate, review. Week 0, we'll be doing some giveaways for some of the awesome reviews that we had. We'll just send out a bunch of stuff. So keep them coming. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Appreciate all of your support. So happy that we can have an exclusive college football only channel. It's time for us to go now start working on week 0, week 1, finishing up the futures. And if you haven't already, make sure you check out all of our other previews, including the group of 5 that we've already done. Everything is out there as far as preseason content. I have a ton of written stuff, both Collin and myself, on the Action Network app and actionnetwork.com. Appreciate all of your support. Appreciate you listening. Thanks, as always, to Collin. It's time for us to go get to work. We'll catch y'all later. Cheers.
Peace out.